We're going to start with coiling, and to do that we're going to prepare a rod as well as a couple of grounding clamps. These grounding clamp assemblies are something that I developed to aid in making 90-degree exits from coils. And what it is it's a grounding rod clamp, an extended hex nut, I believe these are 4 inches, a coupling nut, a nylon spacer, and another nut. And the reason for the nut and spacer is right now this wants to spin. That's going to be difficult to attach your sleeve to. So the spacer and nut creates tension, and now it doesn't want to rotate. So once you get it positioned, you'll have the flat side facing the inside, flush with the connector, and then you'll tighten that down. That is how we're going to tackle these. Now, let me just look at my database, and we're going to note that this is a right rear exit, or otherwise known as a right-oriented double 90. And to do that, let's think about how to orient these rods and the sleeve. So this is the final orientation. We want the sleeve to come out on top and go into the USB-C port on the left of this client's keyboard. We then want the coil to flow towards the right, and then we'll eventually want it to exit towards the back, towards the monitors. This is what is known as a right rear exit, or a double 90. Now, if we were to coil like this, bringing the sleeve, taping it there, and then coiling, when we reverse this coil to give it that snap and durability that we all love, you'll note that it'll be a left rear exit. And that's because we need to think of this opposite from the beginning. So if this is the way that we want our coil to come out, all we need to do is flip it over. That's all. That puts the coil coming out on the bottom, and then when it reverses, that will then end up on the top as we intend. So let's start here, and we'll take one end, and I personally like to have 2.5 inches of exposed sleeve before the soldering stuff. So I'll hold it about right here, and then I'll line it up with that. And I can tell that this is going to line up with just about the end of my nut, which is exactly how I planned these. So I'm just adjusting the rotation there. So now this is nice and flat. And now I'm going to cut a couple of lengths of Kapton tape. You can also use electrical tape. With electrical tape, make sure that the coil has come 100% to room temperature before attempting to remove the electrical tape. That will help prevent residue, but with any type of electrical tape or painter's tape, there is the possibility of residue. And I'm going around giving this one more little cleanup. Now, we'll hold it to our rod in the opposite orientation, like so. And then we'll take our piece of Kapton tape, and we're just going to tape this around. And we're going to go around a few times. And then when you get to about here, take your fingers and make a little fold. This is called a buddy tag. My wife taught it to me. She's a vet tech. And the reason that this is called a buddy tag is that you're being a buddy to your future self by making it easier to remove this tape later by giving yourself a little tab to pull. Now, to begin the coiling process, hold the grounding rod clamp in your left hand and take your right thumb and just press. And all you're doing is guiding the sleeve. Now, there are multiple ways that you can grip the rod to do this coiling, but this is one way that I like. It's very controlled, I feel. So you're just rotating the coil, making sure you maintain a good tight grip. And we're about halfway. Usually this is about where my hands start getting tired, so I'll switch to a different grip. Still using my thumb and fingers to guide. And just rotating to sleeve this on. We're almost at the end. I'll switch back to my original grip. And now this is our double 90. We're gonna crank. Basically, you're just tightening the coil and then compress the coil by pressing it into itself. This will be the tightest possible coil when you have compression and torsion going around. Now we can add our second grounding rod clamp, and then we'll tighten that rod down. We'll tighten it down onto the rod and look for the orientation of it. I like to have them perfectly flat, perfectly in line, and then we'll use this little wrench to tighten that down. We'll bring our coupling nut as close as we can, and then we secure the other one, the other nut. Now, with that in place, we'll take our second piece of Captain tape and add our buddy tag, and then we will finish that off. Now, I generally only use Captain tape, but if you're a beginner, you may want to either add electrical tape, or potentially you're just using electrical tape on its own. So I will go ahead and show how to do that. Now, if you're adding a second layer over another piece, try to get it so that you're taping to the buddy tag. This way that, and then going in the same orientation. And then just go around a couple of times. Nice and tight, but not overly tight. We don't want to compress the coil sleeve, sorry. We don't want to compress it too much. Now that that's on there, we'll go and do the other side. Again, I don't personally use 2 layers of tape, but you may find it beneficial if you're starting out. There we go. We'll add our buddy tag and just flatten that out. Now, this is ready to go into the oven. Okay, an optional step that I use is tinfoil. And I use tinfoil for a couple of reasons that benefit me, which is I can protect the coil from a couple different things. One, it'll protect the coil against sudden temperature spikes. It should help the heat spread more evenly, and it should prevent the coils from getting scuffed or scraped against anything in the oven or the freezer. We're ready to take this over to the oven. Oakley dokley. We've got our oven set to 235 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature that I've found works best for my specific oven. Once again, I recommend experimentation and starting low. Baking times vary, but I personally bake mine for 50 minutes at a time. So in the oven it goes. And now we're going to set a timer. In my case, 50 minutes. Yours will vary between 30 minutes and an hour. After our 50 minutes has elapsed, we're going to transfer our coils from the oven to the freezer. Make sure to use oven mitts as the metal will be very hot. Our coil has come back up to room temperature, and we're ready to begin the reversing process. Reversal is the process by which we essentially invert our coil across the length in order to put the device lead out onto the top where we want it to be, and so that it has the final orientation. But the physical benefits of reversing your coils is that they will be tighter, more springy, and more durable overall. So to begin, we've got our coil in the intended position, but the leads are coming out the wrong way. The reason I bring this up is you want to make sure to think about the orientations you're going for, because if you just pick a random one, it could go poorly. So I know that this is how I want it to be, so as soon as I take off the coil, I'm going to set the rod down in this orientation. That's just so that I don't forget. Okay, so let's start by undoing the tape on both ends and removing it. Use your buddy tag to get this started nice and easily, and then it can come off really fast once you get the hang of it. Now, I noticed that this one felt a little loose, so I'm actually going to... Oh, no, that's not the issue. Here we go. This was what was loose, so I just tightened that back down. And now I'm going to take off the second grounding rod clamp assembly. Now that this is off, the way to remove your coil is, don't just pull it straight off, because there's a chance that you have some burrs. Ooh, I dropped my coil. It's back. There's a chance that you have some metal burrs from the screw that you used. So the way to avoid that is to slightly twist the coil towards itself, and then we'll just lay that rod back down. We will flip it over lengthwise. This is how we're going to hold it when we start reversing. We'll grab our rod, and to start the reversal process, basically bring that device lead towards the junction of the coil and the device lead and the rod, and then invert across guiding the coil gently. And then starting to work our way around. Notice that I'm using my middle finger to pull the unwound coil away from what's being wound on. This is to prevent the tech flex from being damaged. And then once we get 5 or 6, maybe 7 coils back onto the rod, we can secure the device lead with tape. So get your rod to about here, your coil to about there, and then we're going to bring this device lead up to where we want it to be. And I'm controlling the length that's on either side, because I know that this side was a little bit too long and this side was a little bit too short. So I'm pulling that out to the dimension that I want it to be. We'll take our piece of Captain tape and start to wrap that tightly, but not too tightly. I'll add my buddy tag and then bring that all the way around. Now, I'll just kind of press the coil over into the grounding rod clamp gently to remove the gaps that were there. And then I'll also twist towards the coil just to get that nice and tight. And now, using both hands and using my fingers to support the coil, I just work that around the rod. And yeah, once you get the hang of it, it goes pretty quick. I've got about 6 more of these to do in this batch. And then they'll go back in the oven and freezer for the same amount of time. Okay, we're approaching the end of this rod, of this coil. This is where the lead will start hitting your hand and making it a little more difficult. But as we finish this, guide your device lead carefully towards the coil. Towards the direction it should be going in, I should say. And then use your hands to twist any tension, any slack out, increasing the tension. Now we can take our grounding rod clamp and reinstall that, making sure that it's relatively flat. We'll then take this device lead and bring it here. We'll secure that. That's secured, and now we'll add back on our tin foil. This is going back in my pan, and it'll be waiting for the next round in the oven and the freezer. Both the oven and freezer times should be about the same as your first cycle. That's all for this one. Stay tuned for the next part in this series. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and check the bell icon to get notified when my next video is posted. For more cable content, follow me on Instagram and join my Discord server. As always, I'm Voxel, you're you, and together we can foster a supportive DIY community.